This is Modern Gaming Culture. This series will attempt to highlight the phenomenon of PC, console, and mobile gaming and bring to light all of its phenomenal aspects. Let's take a dive together into the world of modern gaming and take apart its structure. Now, here's your host, Rotimi Osagi. All right, this is Modern Gaming Culture. This is episode 7, Modern Gaming Culture. Um, and it seems like, the speed for this episode is going to be very quick, right? Um, and aggressive. And so there's really no reason to shy away from that. Um, and so, you know, um, and um, respect to that, right? I think I should just, deliver it with that sentiment, right? Um, so honestly, it's been a wild ride since the last episode, and you know, a large part of this iteration of modern culture is going to just be setting the pace for what modern gaming culture may become, right? You know, I don't want my legacy to be one of trepidation and skirting the periphery, right? I really want to be remembered as somebody who went all the way, right? And so, um, as much as I try to, um, reel things in, right, and really just reach people, at the same time, I also have to inject a little bit of my personality so that people really understand what I'm saying, right, from a personal perspective, right. It's good when you can really corroborate a lot of what someone's saying, but also when it comes to really putting your finger on the pulse, right? Um, personality is a big part of that. So, last episode, I was talking about sort of internet radio in general, right? Um, sort of expanded a little bit on the pace the show will really go. Um, and I think with that episode, I was setting people up for something pretty spectacular, you know, along the next few episodes, and if you're expecting something like that, I'm sorry, because again, right, in gaming culture we face a lot of challenges, and so we can't always deliver, right? So that's why we have shipping. But jokes aside, gaming culture is incredibly volatile of a field, right? Because a lot of what the powers that be, so to speak, trying to do in gamer culture, they're really trying to do behind closed doors. You don't get that political spotlight shown into gamer culture often, right? Particularly this aspect of gamer culture, right? I wouldn't consider, because the term gamer culture might conjure up images, of sports, right? But that's a whole entirely different realm, right? Nobody refers to the arena of the ball games, right, as gamer culture, right? They just refer to them generally by their names, right? Soccer, football, baseball, etc., right? So I don't think I'm really throwing people off by using the term gaming culture, right? So I'm not gonna entertain that. But you know, we face challenges, right? And especially considering, right, we don't really have the political spotlight shown on us, right, often, right, unless something incredibly wild occurs, right? Like something comes to mind, like there was some incident with a first-person shooter. They were hosting an event, and then some crazy person killed one of the players, right? That's like the last time that game of culture has really had a spotlight shown on it, right? Besides that, really, since the early 2000s, there really hasn't been much of a you know big stink made about game of culture, right? And so, um, as a result, right, people don't really realize what's out there, right? And so, um, you know, with setting the pace for my show, I also have to do with a lot of challenges, right? Personal challenges, right, etc. Right? And so, um, again, right, I've been preparing people in earnest, right, for the spontaneity that this show is really going to possess, right? Um, but I think what I really want to do, before really trying to lean in on people this episode, is really qualify a lot of spontaneity, right? Um, you know, when you have when you have such a concentration of talent, right? And strength, right? You really take a lot of things for granted, honestly, right? Um, and so it takes a lot of unpacking to really get to the truth of a matter, right? Um, you have a lot of incidences in gamer culture where people are really crazy, quite frankly, right? Um, and it has nothing to do with anything except for people are just um, lazy, um, impotent, unkept, right? Mentally ill, um, opportunistic, right? Um, Ideological, right? Solipsistic, um, and in a daze, right? Like really, like it's a state that resembles a heavily drugged state. You really understand, you know, a lot of these characters that we really encounter in gaming culture. Um, People who are just not there, quite frankly. Um, and it requires, again, right, a very colossal skill set to really engage a lot of these people, right? And so, it's often been said though that you know um, you will really get dragged down by the garbage around you, right? Kind of paraphrasing, but um, you know, again, right, understanding what we're really encountering, right? We have a lot of challenges to face, right? And so um, things will seem like they're getting really good, right? And people will really um, stoke, malaise, right? Um, I don't know if I've talked about this, as the definition of griefing. Stoking, intentionally trying to stoke malaise, into people, right? Um, that's how I would, define this phenomenon of griefing that we really observe in gaming culture, right? Um, you know, right? You'll find people who are just really trying to stoke malaise, right? In quite interesting ways, quite frankly, right? And that's all they really deserve. It's nothing, there's nothing about it, right? It's quite interesting, is all. And so, this is what we put up with, right? You know, people, how we make our living, right? Ultimately, is people really come to us, right? And they basically try to give us an offer we can't refuse. You know, here is everything I own. Here is all of my family's possessions, right? Here is my salary. You can have it. And in return, I will live your life and you will live my life, basically, right? And then we tell them no. And they're like, all right, here's $5,000, right? And so um, that's something that doesn't come, you know, easy, let's just say, right? That's definitely going to be a mainstay topic on the show. Really understanding what we do in gaming culture, right? How we, you know, make our living, so to speak, right? Etc. Right? You know, again, right? When you enter the arena gamer culture, right, especially from the outside looking in, right? Again, because of just how poorly internet publishing has really been managed, right? All you'll get is, you know, video after video of, oh, my $100,000 collection, or I just won a regional, you know, $10,000 in the bank, right? Um, Thinking, you know, that is gamer culture, basically, right? That's nothing except for, you know, fantasy at best and noise at worst, right? Um, None of that material is helpful for understanding gaming culture, except for understanding how retarded a lot of people are in gaming culture, right? And I'll just use that word very blatantly. Um, and because if you understand in gaming culture, this is not a mystery to us, right? Again, this just goes back to people don't really know what's out there, right? So when people really encounter, you know, these people in gaming culture who are just making a big stink about how stupid people are get so defensive and they're like, "Whoa, take it easy, man." And it's like it's because you don't know what's out there ultimately, right? So yeah. Another thing that's gonna be part of this episode is really just setting the pace for, you know, dealing with these people basically, right? You know, if you've been paying attention for these last few shows, right, you are probably starting to realize that, you know, again, I have a very nonchalant, relaxed, you know, posture. You know, I don't really I don't look spontaneous. I don't look unpredictable. I am carry myself very well, right? And I'm very steady and I'm very focused, right? Um, see, so um, you're like, you're probably coming from watching a Twitch stream or maybe some event that's being streamed on Twitch or YouTube, right? And you're like, holy crap, right? These people are crazy out of their mind, right? These people walk among us, right? Um, and these people are attracting a lot of attention, right? From pretty garbage people too, right? Um, and yet this guy claims to be part of gaming culture and exhibits none of these traits, none of these characteristics, right? Seems like just like a regular guy walking on the street, right? Um, that you can just have a conversation with, you know, maybe if I'm, you know, a barista or something, I can just give you a coffee, go on your with your day, right? No problem, right? You'll consider me probably a very pleasant, gentle, kind-hearted person, right? Um, and then when I'm really starting to set the pace for the show, and I'm talking about this is going to be very heavy, you know, etc., right? You're like, but you know, this guy's coming off like everything's all right, you know, and I really just have to sit back and listen to what he has to say and really just take it as an intellectual curiosity, right? Um, and that is because again, you just don't know what's out there, right? You know, so you know, again, right? In the first few episodes, I was really leaning into people, making sure people understand. You know, this show doesn't understand. This show doesn't represent me just coming on, pointing a camera at myself, and you know, just speaking into a microphone. right? That I've been preparing for the show months in advance, right? And so, you know, a lot of stuff, a lot of material, right? If I'm not just gonna go over every single episode before I come on, right? So I know what I've covered, right? If there's stuff that I really just talked about when I was practicing, right? Okay, and if I don't remember if I've actually uh put that in a public setting, right? I'm just gonna say, maybe I don't know if I've said talked about this yet. Maybe I have, I don't know, right? So I have a lot of material that I have to really track, right, when I'm presenting. So forgive me if I don't remember every single episode and exactly what I talked about in a progression. All right. Um, so yeah, right. You know, I've really been wanting to just try to set the pace and really start to unpack a lot of material. Um, these topics are going to get very heavy, right? But again, I don't want to air out dirty laundry just for the sake of airing out dirty laundry. I really want to understand the audience I'm reaching, right? Understand, where they're at, right? And really cater to them, right? So as not to, um, you know, beat a dead horse, right? Um, and so, in interest of that, right? Um, you know, especially when I want to do, multiple episodes at a time, right? Um, I think I'm rather just gonna keep it short and sweet, right? Um, and kind of analyze a lot of this material, kind of see what I can interject, right? And we'll take it like that, right? Instead of, having something really spontaneous, right? So, I think I'm just gonna leave it there for part of this episode. Um, to conclude, again, right? Um, a lot of these people we encounter, I mean, these people are absolutely nuts, right? Um, so I think I'm just gonna leave it there for Modern Gamer Culture. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you.